See, and that's another thing. The board says, we will just hand you self-esteem. Here, Tammy, please have some self-esteem. No, you earn self-esteem. I never gave them work they couldn't do. I always prepared them for what work was coming. I had lots of models in the classroom, lots of discussion about the expectations, and then I would give them the work, and they were set up for success, which is what you need to do. The board is setting up our kids for no success. I was in a class, and I'd been told by the teacher and everybody else, oh, this student, you really have to really tippy-toe around this student. See, I don't tippy-toe around students like that. It doesn't work. No. Appeasing doesn't work. So I walked into the class that we were just starting the morning. He is actually lying across his chair. I just said, Joe, sit up now. Guess what? He sat up. In fact, I find the whole sexual template that's dumped into the schools now is child abuse.
Yeah. Hi, Judy.
Hi, Tammy.
Good to see you.
And good to see you.
Let's see now. We went for a walk together.
Well, nearly went for a walk.
I went
you
over
went to my
your
house because I've got an arthritic hip. Yes.
Yeah. That was very nice. And you actually don't live very far from me.
True.
But we met at the George Jonas
Freedom Awards.
And Jordan was accepting an award for that night, and we had a little do beforehand. And you and I spoke, and I asked you if you would come on my podcast.
Yes.
And I was looking for someone who might be able to speak about our education system, and I'm very grateful that you said yes, because we need to talk. And
we do.
So the first thing you could do is maybe tell my listeners who you are, what you've been doing, and what brings you and I together here.
Okay. So I'm Judy Anderson. I've been a teacher for 51 years. I'm still teaching at the age of 74, although I'm now a supply teacher. So I taught in the amalgamated Toronto District School Board for 51 years. The first 26 were with the Etobicoke Board. It was a wonderful board. It was very small. We had a lot of support. We all sort of knew each other. It was lovely. And then in 2000, all the boards in Toronto amalgamated, so it just became
How
one.
many boards are there, do you think?
There were 5. There were 5 legacy boards, which all amalgamated into the Toronto board. And the Toronto board was, in fact, the most woke of all the boards. And so everything became quite woke. And I've really loved teaching, which is partly why I'm still teaching, because I love doing it. I'm very good at it. The sad thing is, though, certainly after, it was 1990, there was a real line there. I'd already taught for 20 years, and in 1990, the charter cases were coming down, and I think
charter cases, can you describe what those are?
The 1982 charter that Trudeau brought in, which gave a lot of rights to a lot of people. Responsibilities sort of got sloughed to the side. Rights sort of took the center stage. Many of the things that happened were for adults. I'm going to put on my... so we had... abortion. There was no abortion law. Canada still has no abortion law.
Canada still has no
abortion law. People think that up to 3 months, there is no abortion law at all, which is worse than North Korea. They have an abortion law. These are all anti-child. Easy divorce has not worked for children. And as you know, JPB talks about that, children living with their own parents.
Yes.
I'm from a divorced family. My parents were divorced. I was married to a divorced man. I'm a widow now. So I know all about that. So easy divorce is not a good idea. Then we said common law was equal to marriage. Which didn't help children.
No.
And then we had surrogate parenthood, which did not help children. And then we had same-sex marriage, which doesn't help children.
What do you mean by surrogate parenthood?
Where basically children are chattel. They're sold. You rent a womb. And you can have,
mean.
So all of these sort of tended to take children away from one of their biological parents.
Yeah.
Children living with biological parents are much safer than children who aren't.
And they have more knowledge of who they are because they have their biology.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So all of these things were happening. And if I were a fly in the wall in the board office, I'm pretty sure that the principals were hauled in and they would have said, we don't want any litigation. Therefore, back off. So from then on, up until that point, so the first 20 years of my teaching career, first of all, there were adults. We also started to see the adults disappearing. I call them adult toddlers. They don't behave like adults. So for the first 20 years of my teaching, all the adults, and they were real adults, were on the same page. You know, at home, at school, and even church and synagogue. People actually went to church and synagogue in those days. The adults were on the same page. Children were treated beautifully. We were not afraid of our teachers, but we respected them. We really respected them, and we knew that there would be consequences
to our behavior.
If we did something that we shouldn't do. And I was recalling to you just before this, my grade 5 teacher, and if I talk about we, I have an identical twin. So, so I often say we if I'm talking about our childhood. So Jane and I really liked Mr. Terry, but we'd go home sometimes and say, Mom, Mr. Terry such and such. Dear, I'm sure you deserved it, was always the response.
Right, the teacher knows best.
The teacher knows best, and generally they did, you know. And
I respected teachers completely.
And things were calm. You know, the children respected the teachers respected the children. Some people say, oh, it was really repressive in those days. No, it wasn't. We were really well treated. The boundaries were very clear. Which is what makes kids feel comfortable.
Right, exactly.
And helps their mental health. So after about 1990, what did the board do? It decided to remove boundaries. Remove boundaries. Like there wouldn't be, they don't want litigation.
Right.
So I had a number of cases where a child did something they shouldn't do. I had one principal say to me, oh, I've heard Jason's story, now I'll hear yours. And I said to him, excuse me, I said, mine is not a story.
Right.
I said, I can tell you what actually happened. And that happened over and over, and there were no consequences. And as I was telling you beforehand, one of my students whom I liked very, very much, we had a great relationship. He was in a school, he was bused to a high-end school. I was in a very high-end school. He was bused in from some projects, and he came to school one day with a weapon, which was a slingshot, a real slingshot. They were really scary looking, and said he was going to kill one of my other students. So I reported it, of course, to the office, and it turns out he was a black student, and the school was very high end, so he was supposed to have a police report, and there was supposed to be a suspension. I went to the office and said, please get the police in here to talk to him and do the suspension, and they refused to do it. It was all in for politics. The high-end school, those are both in the public domain. Right. So the school could have seen there was a weapons report. The parents would have said, oh my God, a weapons report at our school? This is not, and then and then the black community might say, well, there's another black student who is being suspended. Right. And he wasn't suspended because he was black. He was suspended because he brought a weapon to school and said he was going to kill another student.
Right.
And I know he wasn't going to kill another student, but that's not the point.
But you don't say those kind of things and get away with it.
But he did.
He did.
He did.
Was he suspended at all?
No, nothing happened. Nothing.
So how did his behavior change after that, do you think?
His behavior? He and I got along really well. Yeah. In the classroom, I didn't, and here's another thing that the board does. They really are bullying, and I really like the VP. He's now a principal. I have the highest regard for this man. But they cut you out. I was never consulted again. They didn't tell me what they were planning to do. So my student came back to the class, and as I said, it wasn't up to me to deal with that particular
thing. How old was
thing.
he?
11.
11.
Yeah, and he did very well with me. When he started with me, he was in grade 5. His sight vocabulary for reading was at a grade 2 level. By the end of the first year, it was up to a grade 5 level.
Right.
Now, his processing wasn't at a grade 5 level, but he was really improving. I liked him
What do you mean by processing?
Oh, processing. Okay, so decoding is that you can actually read the words. Like if you handed me a physics textbook, I could actually read the words, but I would have not a clue what they meant. So decoding is one thing, and processing, meaning understanding, being able to deal with the text and talk about it.
I see.
So he wasn't at a grade 5 level for processing, but I had him for another year, and he made really good gains. So 2 weeks later, I hadn't heard anything about this incident. I saw the wonderful VP, whom I just thought was fantastic. And I said, David, whatever happened with so-and-so and the slingshot.
Yeah.
And he had the grace, because a lot of the administrators don't, to actually look sheepish. And he said, we gave so-and-so a detention. I said, I give him a detention for homework not done. I said, a detention? And he said, and I said, and what happened to the slingshot? He looked even more sheepish, bless him, and said, we phoned his mother and said she could come and get it.
Right.
And that was the day, that was 2006, that I decided I've had it. I'm retiring. Now, that was the next year. And I couldn't afford to stop teaching, so I did a lot of supply teaching. Another thing about this student, I went home and looked up, you've probably heard of IEPs, an individual education plan. I taught special ed for 26 years of my 36-year career. So for each student, there was about a 12-page education plan. We had to actually write what the why they were in the program, and I'm going to be somewhat irreverent. For a lot of them, I would have liked to say BP, bad parenting, and a lot of us believe that, Have you ever
Why do you say that?
Well, because the behavior of some of these kids is incredible. Have you ever heard of ODD? That ODD is oppositional defiant disorder.
Okay.
I think that mainly means a brat.
Right.
A badly behaved child.
Right.
A child who is not well
doesn't
disciplined.
know any boundaries.
Hasn't had the boundaries. And so from 1990 that the board actually removed boundaries. And here's an example. The student, the one with the slingshot, when I got home and realized nothing was being done, I actually looked up the board protocols and it definitely said if there's a weapons report and a threat to another student, the student will have a police report and be suspended.
Right.
But then there was an asterisk. I looked down and it said, if the student has an IEP, individual education plan, the consequences may be waived.
And so what does that mean?
That meant that we aren't going to give him the consequences because, in fact... Because he has an IEP. And you know what they've done to these children, it's just horrible. They need more boundaries.
And so these are kids who've come from different kinds of families?
Oh, yeah. These are the students that I taught. So they came from many different kinds of families.
Yeah.
Some of them were really well off.
So this would be psychological trouble. This could be...
It could be dyslexia.
Yeah.
When I started in special ed, I was simply a literacy specialist. And I was a real literacy specialist. I had wonderful mentors. I really... now special ed tends to be, well, if you're in grade 5 and you're at a grade 2 level, they just give you grade 2 work. Well, you have to do... direct teaching. It's got to be intense. It has to be, and I'll get to that in a few minutes as well. So the thing is, what they seem to say is, well, we'll lower expectations for children who are having problems. That is not the way you do it. In fact, this boy and all of his classmates, they would come to me, and their work habits were usually terrible because they'd been sitting in a class where they couldn't do the work.
Wouldn't keep up, yeah.
Yeah, they couldn't keep up, so they misbehaved and they, didn't pay attention. Their work habits were dreadful. As soon as they arrived in my class, and I was really fortunate, I had 12 kids. Well, okay, for the first many years, the kids came out to me in groups all day. I'd have about 30 students, and they'd come out in their grade level group. So so they'd come in, out every 40 minutes, I'd have a new group. And then my last 8 years, it was a self-contained class. So it was me and...
You had a homeroom then?
I had my own room. It was
Yeah.
wonderful. I had... an EA, educational assistant, and in one case, because I had a Fragile X student that's on the autism scale, I mean, he would run around. I still keep in touch with his family. He's 30. He's still a dear friend. I love him to bits. And but he needed what's called an SNA, a special needs assistant. So she was with him all day because he simply couldn't sit still and so on. So now, what was I saying?
Well, we were talking about you had a homeroom, and you have all these kids in there, and we were
Yes.
talking about whether they
I remember.
IEPs too, and
Okay.
what all
Okay,
that
so they
is
would come
about.
into my class and I'd say, all right, now that you're here with me, I said, I will never ask you to do something you cannot do. So when I give you an assignment, you will do it.
Right.
And that's
right.
also called built-in success. This is another thing that the board does so many things that don't build in success. You know, you teach the kids strengths. You don't teach their weaknesses. So I'm in a lot of classes now. I mean, the special ed department, I would dismantle it and I would start. In fact, I dismantled the ministry and the board and the special ed department because what they say, if you're fidgety, I walk into classrooms and they've got bouncy balls. They don't sit in a chair. They sit in a bouncy ball.
Oh.
Now, when I am in there, I often remove the bouncy ball.
Yes.
I give them a warning. I say, if you keep bouncing, I'm trying to teach, other people are trying to work. If you keep bouncing, I am going to remove that and give you a chair. And guess what happens? I give them a chair and they pay attention.
Right. If I sat on a bouncy ball, I'd bounce.
Yeah, of course. And so that's not playing to their strength.
No.
That's playing to their weakness. They're also, in many classes, they've got fidget toys. They can play with fidget toys all day.
Right.
They're fidgeting, and I say, put them away. And in some classes, I turn the desk right around so that they can't reach into the desk and grab stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So the special ed department now says, we'll lower expectations, poor kids. I mean, what do you call it? The soft, it can be racism. Sometimes it's the race.
But it's compassion
It's
gone wild.
Totally compassion. I mean, in the wrong way because they need more boundaries. And I'll tell you, my kids were very happy in my class. One year I was getting a student who was, when I started teaching, I was just a literacy specialist. As the years went by, autistic kids, ODD, meaning just undisciplined children. So one year I knew I was getting a very sort of disturbed boy who was, he actually did one day say he was going to kill me. And the consequences for him were ridiculous. He had an in-school suspension with the principal. And when she wrote the letter to the mother saying there's going to be an in-school suspension, I wouldn't send it home. It was so full of grammatical errors. So I had to fix the letter for the principal. And so he went down and I said, he may come back to the class when he is done. I had a package of work. And she kept bringing him back and he hadn't done the work. So I said, no, he's not coming back. But I did say to my husband I said, I'm very worried about getting this really difficult student. But I said, you know what, I think maybe my program itself will take care of it because the boundaries were very clear. And it did. And it did. Oh, and now I have to get to the social workers. Yeah, so the social workers
You have social workers in the school?
There are a few. They're in the board.
They're in the board.
They always take the kids' side. I had another student. His family had tons of ferrets, and they were bikers. And David was a really special case. He talked like a stevedore. His language was made your ears curl, but I really liked him. In fact, I really liked all my kids. I really liked them. I'll get back, try and get me back to that. I want to talk about the social workers, but right now I'm going to go to the side. JPB said he had many clients who wanted to improve their status in, their law firm or whatever they were doing. Maybe he had teachers. I don't know. But what he said he had to teach them was he told them what they should be is smart, conscientious, and tough. And as soon as he said that, I thought, you know what? That's why I have survived for 51 years in classrooms, because I am smart. I'm very conscientious, and I'm tough.
Right.
I've got Irish background, Yorkshire background, and I am tough. The only thing I'm going to add to what JPB said is authentic, because I will probably get to some of the horrible things the principals have done to me. Many of them were narcissistic. They were smart. They were conscientious and being bullies, and they were tough. But they weren't authentic. They were imposters. A principal's supposed to be the leader and is supposed to have integrity. So I've met lots of principals who are imposters. They were not authentic, though they were smart, conscientious, and tough. Okay, so I added authentic, and that's why my kids have always responded. I never lost a kid. I don't mean to brag. I never lost a kid. I like tough kids. I like kids who have problems. They find out I'm tougher.
Right.
It might take a couple of weeks. It's not going to be agreeable at first. And that's another thing. If you're in a new school with a new principal and as a supply teacher, of course it's not going to be agreeable if you're dealing with a child who's acting out and being rude. So I could always, within 2 weeks, we were getting along just fine. They could do everything that I wanted them to do. And that, you see, and that's another thing. The board says, we will just hand you self-esteem. Here, Tammy, please have some self-esteem. No, you earn self-esteem. And in my class, because I always started where I never gave them work they couldn't do, I always prepared them for what work was coming. I had lots of models in the classroom, lots of discussion about the expectations, and then I would give them the work, and they were set up for success, which is what you need to do. The board is setting up our kids for no success.
Why do you say that? What do they
Because
do?
they've removed the boundaries.
Yeah.
You know, I'm actually right now with the principal, I'll tell you in person afterwards about it, particular principal right now who is not happy with me because in June, I was dealing with one of the rudest students I've ever met. And it was not pleasant.
How old was he?
She. 11.
11.
And at the end of the day, she came up to me and said, "You weren't nice to me." And I looked at her and said, "You weren't nice to me." However, I could tell that the principal was, on edge, and who knows if I will be back to that school. Actually, who knows after this whether I will be back. We will see if the Toronto Board is really diverse, inclusive, and equitable, because everything I'm telling is the truth.
Yeah,
and
right.
That's the way they behave. So, here's one of my students as well, Spencer. This has happened a long time ago. So I'm in Spencer's class. He's 11 years old. Well, Spencer's in my class, I mean. And he cried a lot. So one day I took him out in the hall. I said, now here's where you see the social workers and the principals want you to be kind and mommy-ish. And no, I wasn't kind and mommy-ish. I took him out in the hall and spanked him. No, I took him out in the hall. I said, "Spencer, how old are you?" He said, I'm 11. I said, well, I want you to know that crying is not going to solve your problems. I said, in fact, crying is making your problems worse. I said, you should spend your time figuring out how to deal with the problem. Now, in you go. Oh, and then there's the other students who had the weapons guy. Every teacher should have a $70. They're the big blue $70 electric pencil sharpeners. They are fantastic. So I had mine, and my student, my weapon student, I'll just call him, of whom I was very fond, but I won't name him, took a pencil with an eraser and put the eraser in. So I was very cross about that. And I said, here, I have a $70 pencil sharpener that I need and that you need, and it's not working. It's Spencer. Yes, Spencer. Mrs. Anderson, I think I can probably fix it. I said, that would be fantastic. Spencer took it home, and he built a little shiv for it. It just, tipped it a bit. It worked. From then on, Spencer and I got along really well. His mom came in at Christmas. I'd taken over the class. And when his mom came in at Christmas, she said, well, Judy, she said, when you came into that class, she said, the parents didn't know what had hit them and the kids. And she said, we are now so grateful. And it was because I set them up for success. I had lots of boundaries. They were expected to behave. And then she said, and Judy, I'd like you to know, if Spencer does any crying at home, we just say, how old are you anyway?
Right. Yeah, so they didn't know what to do.
Well, and here's another. I was in a class, I guess it was 2 years ago, and I'd been told by the teacher and everybody else, oh, this student, you really have to tippy toe around this student. And this student was 8. Well, I went into the class. You see, I don't tippy-toe around students like that. It doesn't work. No. Appeasing doesn't work. And that's the whole thing of the board. It's all about appeasement, not for teachers. Teachers get it in the jugular. But for the kids... So I walked into the class that we were just starting the morning, opening exercises, and he is actually lying across his chair. And instead of pussyfooting, I think I'll call him Joe. I just said, Joe, sit up now. Guess what? He sat up. And then now what you do after that, as soon as he's sitting properly, whenever I could, I would say, good for you. You're sitting so well.
Yeah,
well
praise
done.
Is really important.
As soon as you get their attention. But so many kids, they've never heard no. They've never heard stop. And I do talk that way to them. Oisey and the faculty would say, oh, no, just use a soft, nice voice. No. Joe, sit up now. No, they sort of look around, and he sat up. So the next day I was out in the yard, and he was out in the yard, and he ran up to me and said, Mrs. Anderson, are you going to be in my class again today? I said, well, actually, no. I said, I'm going to be in another class. He said, oh, well, I'm sorry because I like you. And I said, and you know what, Joe? I like you.
Yeah.
And so he behaved, and he still does. I still teach in that school. And people have said to me, like I'd suggested something in an art project, and he actually did it. And someone said, wow, he never takes suggestions. But you see, it's called authority.
Oh, yeah.
Legitimate authority and total respect. I respect these kids because I expect good things from them.
But that's
okay,
not
I just
good
wanted
for
to
them.
read something here from
Sure.
I looked up the mission statement for the TDSB, which I call tyrannical, divisive, systemic bullying. That's the TDSB,
Oh, I see.
know. Anyway, it sounds like Kamala Harris wrote it. It's complete word salad. I won't read the mission, but vision. A new transformed culture where mental health and well-being is integrated into every aspect of each student's school experience. That's just verbal diarrhea. Actually, my classes were like that because I set them up for success.
Yeah.
That is how you do good mental health. You set them up for success. The board now, by removing so many boundaries, well, these kids are sort of like, when babies, like your sort of like your granddaughter, when they're flailing about, you swaddle them.
Yes.
You swaddle them
right.
because their little hands. Our schools are full of children who are basically like toddlers. They're pushing like your granddaughter, and the board just says, keep backing off, keep backing off, keep backing off. Like talking about the social workers. In 2 cases, I had social workers involved, and they both said, back off. I was furious. One of them was my student with the ferrets and the really bad language, and I liked him a lot. He was smart.
Right.
He was very clever.
Right.
We got along really well. I'd been away one day, and apparently I was reading a Narnia story to them, and he was so bad that the teacher sent him out, and he apparently had a tantrum. He lay on the floor. He was 12, screamed and yelled. So when I came back, I heard about that. I just said, this is ridiculous and not acceptable at all. So I said, when I read the Narnia story today, you will go out in the hall. So out he went. He didn't cause any problems. He actually could have read it to himself. So when the social worker came, how is so-and-so doing, she said. CAS was called in for that family. I don't trust them either.
CAS, what's that?
Children's Aid Society.
Oh, yes, right, of course.
They also don't like boundaries. Anyway, that's a whole other story. Anyway, the social worker came. I told her what had happened, that he'd had a tantrum, and I said, so I gave him a consequence. Oh, I hope it wasn't too unpleasant. I said, that's the purpose of a consequence. I said, no, it wasn't too unpleasant. But
it was exactly the right amount of unpleasant.
Well, exactly. So these are the social workers. The social workers take the kids' side, and it's sort of, go easy on them. Be soft on them.
Yeah.
No, you don't be soft on them. And you know what? When you're not soft on them, right from the start, you're fair. But right from the start, you're not soft on them. They then learn to self-regulate.
Yeah, this little girl, 14 months old. Now she's like a little ray of sunshine when you see her.
That's fantastic.
And she's enjoying her time. She's getting to spend time now with her mom and her dad and her brother and learn all kinds of things, because now she doesn't just go to this. This was an infant response that she had kept with her too long, and once that was disciplined and told that no, that is no longer appropriate, she had to learn a new and a better
strategies,
way.
different strategies, like Spencer. I said, crying's not going to work.
Yeah.
Don't do it. So he sort of thought, okay. And so here we come to the principals. I had my teacher performance appraisal, also in 2006, narcissistic principal, a really narcissistic personality disorder. So I've talked to you about how I was a teacher.
Yeah.
I could have had exemplary. And actually, one school, after 5 years there, and another upscale, they were both upscale schools, they closed the program. That's another thing the board keeps doing. The parents fought all the way to the ministry. They were doctors, lawyers, professors, all the way to the ministry to keep my program. So that's how unpopular I was. And, anyway, so in 2006, the principal was doing my teacher performance appraisal. She never sat down and talked to me about my program. She didn't know what it was. She had no idea. She could have given me exemplary, good, pass, or fail.
Yeah.
She gave me a pass with 40 things against me. 40. I mean, yeah, I showed it to another principal. He said that's just vindictive. None of them. The wonderful thing is, starting in 1990, I did a lot of documenting. I documented. So when I handed my IEPs, individual education plans, for the class in October of 2005, she put a sticky on it, and I dated it, said these are the best IEPs I have ever seen. So 40 things against me, one that I did not communicate properly with the parents. Well, the IEPs go home 3 times a year, and the report cards.
Right.
So I had a binder this thick for each of the 40, and we got through the first 10 things against me in 3 hours, with the union person sitting there doing nothing. They do nothing to help you. And my first defense on everyone was, you said my IEPs were the best you've ever seen. So how could it be that I don't communicate with parents properly?
Right.
How could it be that she said I didn't program for them properly. Oh yeah, she said I had a one-size-fits-all. I did not have a one-size-fits-all at all. So that's the kind of, and she got away with that. I wrote a very long rebuttal, the smallest font I've ever seen. I think it was 6, and it filled the whole page, and she defaced it. She wrote on it, in the margins. Unbelievable. Now, I didn't go higher because there's no point. The people, the superintendents, the trustees, they're all like her. So what's the point? So memos helped me a lot. I wrote lots of memos over lots of years, and I call it I just kept a space around me, keeping my elbows out. I just kept a space around me because they'd get a memo from me stating the thing that was unprofessional that had happened. So they knew it was on record. And
so they were just trying to get rid of you.
I think she might have been trying to get rid of me. And interestingly enough, the parents got rid of her the next year. I mean, she was, another thing is because what JPB said, smart, conscientious, tough. You can't get rid of me. Well, you can, because the other principal, I was suspended live as student. And I was suspended in 2 schools. One by a vicious, vindictive, unprofessional, horrible principal. The other one in a school that I loved and the principal I really liked. In both cases, boys lying about me, and there's no due process. You do go in and they tell you what I was marched out of the school. The police were called. I was completely suspended from teaching, which was my livelihood. But that only happened for a week. Union does nothing. I got really busy with emails. I emailed here, there, and everywhere. So within a week, the police had said, no, she can go back to the school. She's not a risk. And
what were you at risk of? Why did they call the police?
It was a complete lie. All right.
Yeah.
When I went in, there was I don't teach grade 7 and 8 anymore. They're dangerous.
Yeah,
they're
I remember
dangerous.
Being in grade 7 and 8.
They will go after you, and they'll actually say, "I'm going to see you're fired." They'll tell you that. All right, so this student, he was grade 8. It was in the computer lab, also a very unsafe place to be. Do not go into a computer lab with grade 7s and 8s. Anyway.
Why? What did they do? That would have been after me.
Go on the computers and all kinds of things they're not supposed to be on. So you're walking around, and I mean,
do they have access to the internet in there?
Yes.
They do? Oh.
So, and as soon as your back is turned, they'll go. And so after I kept saying to him, get to a computer, because he wasn't at one, get to a computer. And then he was sitting with his phone with about 6 friends around him, boys, on his phone. And I walked up behind him loudly saying, put the phone away.
What do you think of kids having phones in schools?
Terrible. They I would say no way. I would get rid of a whole lot of the technology
Yeah.
or really lock it down.
Yeah.
So this guy actually had in his thigh a zipper pocket.
Mm-hmm.
So as I was walking up behind him saying, put that away,
Mm-hmm.
he slipped it into his pocket. I saw him and said, I don't have it. Well, of course, I could see it
Right.
like that. Oh,
Yeah.
and I said, I can see it and touch it. You know, just. And then he started going, ow, ow, ow. And I said, how ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I phoned the office, sent him down. And then the vice principal, who later marched me out of the school, he and I had a chat about this student who had, a rap sheet as long as his leg. Anyway, later on, the vice principal came into the classroom. And I smiled and said, nice to see you. He said, he didn't smile. He said, get your things and you're leaving right now. Just walking down the hall. Oh, and they won't tell you either. I said, who's, I knew who it was, but, who's the student? I can't tell you.
Right.
What's the complaint? I can't tell you. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you never face the student.
No.
It's a kangaroo court. You go in. So when I went in for the first meeting with the union person who was useless, they said, you patted down a 13-year-old's thigh to try to get a phone back. And you also called him a sissy. So I swore an affidavit. A friend's a lawyer. I swore an affidavit, and now this principal is vindictive, nasty. She's retired now. She was unbelievably unprofessional. And there are no consequences for principals. They break all the rules, and there are no consequences for them. So I've never put a grievance in.
Well, principals don't have any authority anymore either, though.
Well, they do. They have huge authority over teachers.
Oh, I thought, okay, they have authority over teachers, but principals, they answer to the superintendent.
Well, they
not?
do. They do, but they still have. They're the captain of their ship.
They still are.
Oh, yeah. And if you've got a good principal, it makes a huge difference because that school then, it's an even keel.
Yeah,
For the
right.
ones who aren't very good, it's tippy. It doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
And they're often the principals who go after people. So this principal. When I went in, we got the affidavit. It was 15 paragraphs long, and it said exactly what had happened. So I took it to the school. The secretary, I said, am I allowed on the property? No. She said, I'll check with the principal. So no, you're not even allowed on the property. So I said, so the school administrator came out, and they're what we used to call secretaries. She came out, and I handed her and I said, this is an affidavit about what really happened. And she said, Judy, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry this has happened to you. So they had the affidavit. I went in 2 weeks later. Again, with the union person who just sits there and watches the teacher being berated. They actually had a doctored video on a cell phone. That's not allowed. You can't. And I said, yeah, that looks like me, but it was completely doctored. It was at a different, and not at all what I described. And not only doctored, because I'd been loudly, I knew it was doctored. Everything was quiet. I went up to some student, you couldn't see, it was blocked out who the student was. And then all of a sudden you hear, sissy.
Oh, I see.
You know what I mean? They doctored it. And I said, show that to me again. I said, show that to me again. I said, that wouldn't hold up in court for a second.
Yeah.
And what the union person should have said is, you email that to us tomorrow. And they should have really gone after them and said, this is against the law. You cannot videotape a teacher, and especially you can't doctor it and use it against the teacher.
Yeah, right. Falsifying evidence.
It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, the principal said, I also said to her, I said, why do you think I teach so much in your school from kindergarten to grade 8 math? She just sat there. I said, you know what? Because I'm very good at it. From kindergarten to grade 8. And, there aren't a lot of teachers who can do the whole gamut. I can. I was very well educated in Toronto. Rosedale School, Jarvis Collegiate, Deer Park School. Then I went to Trinity College. We were taught properly. So, yeah, I can do a lot of stuff. Anyway, so she just went, and she looked at me and said, well, we're not saying you can't come to this school again, but we would suggest that you don't. So I just looked at her and said, with pleasure. And luckily, I was a little worried. I thought, well, I got a lot of jobs here. But once I didn't go there, I got lots of jobs elsewhere. But yeah, the way teachers are treated. Oh, and, I mean, this is, I wanted to make the disclaimer. There are many good schools still.
Right.
There are many fine teachers. I've got dear friends with whom I teach and whose classes I teach. They're wonderful. But I have to say it's in spite of the board. In spite of it. Oh, yeah, another story that happened recently. A student who I believe is a sociopath, all of the teachers think that he is, he slammed another student's hand in the door, and there was blood all over. The only thing that happened was a broken finger. His whole hand could have been ruined for life. So I sent him to the principal. I was really annoyed. I sent the student who's bleeding, and then I turned around to this sociopath and I said, "Look what you did." I said, "This is horrible. It's terrible what you've done." "It was an accident," he said. I said, "Get to the office now." Okay, so that's the first half of it. So down he went. Well, 20 minutes later, who should arrive at the door of the class but the principal and the student? The principal hadn't phoned me. I just said, "He's not coming in." I said, "He's not welcome. He's not coming into this class." And the principal said, Judy. Unbelievable. Oh, and there were no consequences for that student either. He'd slammed a kid's hand in the door. He could have ruined that hand for life.
Right.
Nothing, no consequences. And this kid is known as a bully. Actually, he's a kid I get along well with because when I was first in his class, I said, "Smarten up and do what I tell you to do. That's it." And, he and I get along quite well. But it breaks my heart to see all of these children. You're talking about your grandchild. You know how to set boundaries. Teachers used to know how to set boundaries. Well, actually, we still do. The younger teachers maybe not, because OAC and the faculty are, they're saying just be nice with them. And you know what? If they're having a problem, there's probably something awful in their family. Listen, I grew up, I had a divorced parents. Things are awful in lots of our lives. You don't let people off the hook.
No.
In fact, it makes them more at sea when you don't set those boundaries. So, yeah, it breaks my heart. I see all of these children who need, I've written down here my priorities. Best practice, authority, and respect. Oh, and forget all the little groups that are okay. There's LGBT, there's Black, there's Muslim. We even have a Tamil Appreciation Month. I don't know much about that. Now, of course, if you're a British Christian, my background is British Christian, you're bad. So forget, that is so divisive. It is so horrible. In my class, it was golden rule. Isn't that the best one?
Yeah, that's
Treat
the rule
others the way you wish to be treated. We could get rid of a whole lot of the problems if the groups weren't all divided up into, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay, you're not. It's just ridiculous. So the golden rule, you just treat people the way you want to be treated. High expectations. I said that. Consequences. Teach the student strengths. Yeah. And learn to mastery. Like grade 1 to 3. The curriculum is so overloaded. Teachers are, and they keep adding stuff. You have to take some stuff away. They've added cursive writing. I'm all in favor of cursive writing. But it's very intensive. It needs a real commitment over a long period of time. You have to know how to do it. So they're saying, we're going to add cursive writing. Well, the teachers don't know how to do cursive writing themselves. They don't know how to teach cursive writing. They don't know how much, the kids at first, are sort of against it. You've really got to, you've got to set time aside and said, you will be writing, cursive writing. That's what you must do. So it's a very intensive program.
We used to have those little books with dotted letters that you had to follow and you traced them. Do they still have those?
No, not really. I've taken books that are quite good, and I have done. Let's say it's J. I've done maybe 20 or 30 J's, and they will trace, because giving them 1 or 2 to look at and then saying now do it. Yeah. Well, they can't. No. They've got to trace it. So.
And we used to go up to the board, I think, too, and trace them on the board as well.
Well, so the ministry. So. Kids don't have time to learn to mastery now. Grade 1 math, they do probability. I mean, I called mine a narrow.
Grade 1, they do probability?
Yes. in math.
And they know how to add and subtract and divide.
No, that's the whole point. Now, grade 1, they don't do dividing. Well, they could do pictures of dividing. But
they do probability before they learn the functions.
And the math is one of the hardest ones because it's absolutely jam-packed. There are 5 different strands: geometry, probability, number sense, and numeration is arithmetic.
Yeah.
That's the biggest one.
Yeah.
On the report card, they all look equal, though. Number sense and numeration should be 90%, and then do a little bit of geometry, do a little bit of maybe probability.
Right.
I can't remember the other 2. So the thing is, the teachers are just scrambling. For the first report card, they'll say, well, you have to do 3 strands in math. So the kids are not learning to mastery. They're not doing intensive. Oh yeah, the principal who nearly failed me. One of my techniques I said was, what did I call it? Massive practice. And she laughed in my face and said, "That's not a technique. You can't. If you put it in your IEP, you've got to put quotation marks around it." Well, you and I know about massive practice. When we went to school, 1 plus 1 is 1, 2, 2 plus, and you'd recite by rote the multiplication tables. There's no time for that. So I'd like to see grade 1 to 3. I'd throw out the curriculum, narrow and deep, so that grades 1 to 3 would just do phonics, syllabication, parts of speech. In math, adding and subtracting over and over and over until they knew it. I'm actually tutoring a student right now. He's going into grade 6. He wrote a paragraph for me the other day because we've just started. He still uses a lowercase I for himself. And no capitals on Wednesday, or can't spell the days of the week going into grade 6. That's happening all over the place. And they won't, here's another thing, they won't let kids repeat. Their self-esteem. Well, so a kid is in grade 1 who has not finished grade 1, who can't do grade 1. Well, then you put the kid in grade 2.
Oh, I see. They just put them...
They get pushed forward.
Yeah.
So by the time, how does that help self-esteem?
Right.
You haven't finished grade 1. You're maybe even barely beginning grade 1, and they put you in grade 2. Well, by the time the children get to, one of my best friends, she teaches grade 5, 6. She is fantastic. Totally sets boundaries. And makes those kids work like anything. Oh, darn it, what was I talking about? Oh, yeah, so by the time the kids get to her class, and again, this is a fairly high-end school, she'll have children working at a grade 2 level, and because a lot of professors, doctors, lawyers live in this area, some of the kids in the grade 5, 6 will actually be working at a 7 or 8 level. They're very advanced. Right. So my friend's grade 5, 6 class runs the gamut from grade 2 to grade 8.
Wow.
And of course, she's supposed to program for all of them.
Yes, right.
For the ones who are ahead. Now, she certainly does for the kids who are ahead. She's got a very rigorous program. How do you program for a child at grade 2 level who can't read the texts, who can't write? And of course, they've dismantled all the self-contained classes. In my last 8 years, I had self-contained classes. Even when they were going to close my program, which the parents fought all the way to the ministry to keep, I said, I will take 20. I had 12 children. I said, I will take 20. No, the board closed it. Was there less need for the program? No. So you know what they did? They basically dumped all the kids back into the regular class. They get a little bit of help. They might be taken out for half an hour here, half an hour there, but that can't make up for years and years and years of being behind.
Well, I remember when we went to school, we never had any. I was in a rural school, and so there was no division. It was just, you're in grade 1, you're in grade 1. But there were kids who were older in my class because they couldn't be put ahead because they didn't understand the concepts. And the kids who did very well and were finished their work helped the kids who needed help.
Yeah, sort of like tutoring.
Yeah, that's right. And so I remember tutoring math every day.
Wow, that's great.
Every day. Yeah. And I remember those, and it's not an unpleasant memory. It's a good memory.
So the thing is, pushing kids on. See, again, it's saying everything they say is to help self-esteem. pulls down self-esteem. You're pushing kids way ahead. So every year, then the kid doesn't finish grade 2. They're probably still working at grade 1, and then they're put in grade 3.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's a policy that makes no sense at all. So, of course, the child is going to feel somewhat they'll feel singled out having to repeat the grade, but guess what? They're already singled out if they're in grade 3 and they're working at grade 1 level.
That's right.
Or they're in grade 6 and they're working at grade 2. So the thing is, they think they can whitewash the problem.
Or they just want to get them through the system quickly.
Yeah, but it's hell on teachers, and it's mainly hell on these kids.
Now, do kids still get recess, 15-minute recesses?
They do. They get recess, 15 minutes in the morning, 15 in the afternoon.
And do they go home for lunch?
Most of them don't.
They don't.
Most of them don't.
Is there
there's
a room that's for everyone to eat lunch in? Or?
Okay, so, schools are different. One school that I go to, the kids eat in their classrooms. It's interesting. They go out from 11:45 till 12:45, but at 11:30 in their class, they eat lunch in the classroom, for those 15 minutes, and then they have an hour. Other schools, it'll be from 11:45 to 12:45. They'll go down to the gym, where there are a lot of tables, eat there, and go out about 12. So they'll get 3/4 of an hour.
Okay, because I heard rumors that they were taking their breaks away in between classes, but they still have their breaks.
They do, and they
Thank
have
goodness
recess.
for that.
Yes, and they like going outside. Here was another policy which fell by the wayside because it was so ridiculous. It was called DPA, daily physical activity. So teachers were supposed to take a half hour every day to do DPA. Well, I spoke up at the staff meeting and said, look, I can't afford to give up half an hour every day because I had grade 4, 5, and 6 age students in my class, and they were in and out for. I said, and I'm not a gym teacher.
Right.
I said, what do I have to do? Go out and buy a sports bra so I can jump around with them? And DPA has gone by the board because teachers, I guess they just realize they get their recesses, they get to go out at lunch. I've got so much to cover in the curriculum. I can't give up half an hour a day.
Yeah, so the curriculum is complicated?
It's overloaded.
Overloaded.
And as I said in the math, they don't do narrow and deep. Like to the end of grade 3, it should be mainly arithmetic.
Yes.
Until they really get the concepts. There's no time for them to consolidate the concepts and feel confident.
Yeah.
So they keep pushing them on to do these other things, and the foundation is like quicksand. They don't have a foundation, so all this other stuff is just mushy because they aren't prepared for it. And in history and social studies, they have them do things that they're not anywhere near mature enough to be able to deal with them. Of course, it's all the politically correct woke agenda that they're supposed to be dealing with, and they go on the computer, and it's mainly propaganda. And they're also their level of thinking. They're not at that level yet. They should be doing much simpler things. Like they're actually asking them to solve the world problems.
Yeah, right.
Here's your assignment. And so it's just gobbledygook. It's just propaganda that they get off their computers, and they just regurgitate it and think they've done a great job, but it doesn't make any sense because
the education system, even when we were young. Let's see, in social studies, we learned, by grade 6, we had learned about Egypt. Egypt was interesting.
Yes.
We learned about Egypt. We learned the First World War by the time we were in high school, and the Second World War. We didn't go beyond the Second World War.
Okay, yeah.
Right? There was nothing beyond the Second World War. And this was in the 70s. Too. And I questioned that. I thought, there's been 40 years now since that. Why aren't we talking about the things that are going on?
Right, that's interesting.
And so I don't know what's happening now, but I found the curriculum even in the 70s was starting to loosen up and not be as rigid as it might have been.
Yes.
And go deeply into things so that people could learn the basics of math and literacy.
And see, going deeply into things that you're not prepared. If your brain isn't prepared probably some of them are writing about the Ukraine war now. I mean, I'm just saying
Right.
we don't have enough information. There are too many aspects to it. But, we weren't, when I went to school, Jarvis in the 60s, really very well, geography and so on. It was very rigorous, but we weren't asked to solve the world's problems.
No.
Because also they knew that our brains were not capable of
Right.
doing that. So they're asking these kids to do things that they're simply not ready for. So what a waste of time if you're working on projects that your little brain can only see, one tiny corner. And
When do they start teaching equity? Is that in high school or is that before high school?
I'm sure I'm sure it is. They were probably doing it sort of in kindergarten even.
Oh, dear.
I know a kindergarten where they watch Drag Queen Story Hour every day.
Yeah.
Like, forget it. Have the teacher read the story. Why do you have drag queens? Now it's on, screen. But and there's
Unbelievable.
There's a reading program. I mean, I can't. It's all named after trees. There's silver birch, which is I think for the kindergarten to grade 3.
Right.
And if you get your book approved by this, you've hit a gold mine because every school in Ontario has a copy of the 6 or so books each year. The kids vote on them.
I see.
And I am quite against the program because the books are didactic. They're propaganda. They're in most cases, they're poorly written.
And these aren't tried and true literature from the past.
Precisely. And they don't even add up to literature. They're all the woke things. One of them was called I Hate Plastic. First of all, it was ugly as anything. The dark and the artwork was terrible. And this little girl out in PEI or somewhere builds, to get people's attention, she builds a life-size whale. You don't find out how she did it. There's no way she could do it. And things happened. There was actually, it was a lovely, the artwork was wonderful. It was for K-3, and it was about a little girl learning to cook a national dish for her mom. She was at the refugee center. Well, in the background, there's a picture of 2 men kissing.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Completely unnecessary.
Completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing. And one of them, the Sorry Life of Timothy Schmo. He's a complete bully. The worst thing he does horrible things, no consequences. His great-grandmother is in her wheelchair, and when his mom isn't there, he pushes the wheelchair and it goes careening across the room, and she bangs into the wall. And at the end, his father, so there's an ending coming. You're sort of thinking that maybe the father will say something about this horrible behavior, and all he does is hug him and say, "I love you." Well,
And so, and who decides that the kids are going to read that book?
Obviously, some kind of a panel that
Not the children. It's not the children.
No. And what was interesting about this Timothy Schmo, I wrote. I'll maybe send it to you. I wrote a review about it. I was so disgusted. It was so horrible. The little on the book, the little blurb was grammatically incorrect. This is on the book. So the thing is, the kids' heads are being filled with stuff like this. Now, many teachers read good literature to them, which is great. But this is a whole program which costs a whole amount of money. And one of the teachers in one of the schools I know said, "I don't do it." And we had a chat about it. I said, "Good for you." I said, if I were teaching full time, I would not do it. And when I had to read, but the teacher had put in her that I was to read the Timothy Schmo book to the kids, I did not tell them what I thought because they vote on it.
Right.
But before they voted, I just said, how many of you, put up your hand if you would like Timothy Schmo for a friend? Nobody put up their hand, because he was a bully.
Yeah.
And this is grade 3. Now, the interesting thing, they'd been doing anti-bullying posters. The more anti-bullying posters there are, the more bullying there is. Like when I went to school, we didn't have any anti-bullying.
Yeah,
because we treated each other well.
When there's a suicide and they start to advertise suicide telephones, the suicide goes up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the morning, I'd been in the class, they'd done their anti-bullying posters. Then in the afternoon, I read them Timothy Schmo, and they rated Timothy Schmo. Most of them gave it a 3 or a 4 or a 5 because they thought it was funny. And I went home and I was really unhappy. I thought, how could they do anti-bullying posters in the morning? I read them a story about an arch bully who's bullied everybody, no consequences, and they liked it because they thought it was funny. Then it dawned on me, I thought, they're grade 3. Their brains are not at the level, they didn't connect the posters they were doing with the story because they're only grade 3.
Yeah.
Maybe by grade 6, they would have said, wait a minute, there's sort of an irony here. We talked about anti-bullying and this kid.
So it wasn't age appropriate for those kids?
Well, what bothered me is that, it wasn't appropriate, period. Because he was a bully. I mean, and the school's all full of So how that book ever got approved is beyond me, just completely beyond me. So our
teachers, in the university professors are being counseled. Are teachers being counseled in the school system?
Like, how do you mean canceled?
Well, in the university, teachers professors are actually being
let go.
Let go.
Okay, that doesn't happen in the school system, and I'm really on teacher's side. I'm a real teacher booster, but I do think that the youngest teachers, they've been brought up to learn about offense. I'm offended. They've learned the woke stuff.
Well, I'm interested too. The ones that come out of OISE and then come into the school system now, how their education is different from the older teachers who were...
Well, I think they've probably been taught, I've said to a couple of them, they're lovely, the young students. They're not told about the culture. They're not told how teachers are bullied. They're not told how they're bullied by the kids. They're bullied by the parents. Not all the time, everywhere, obviously, but and even in the best schools, the schools that I really like being in, you can fall into a hole in 2 seconds. If a kid says, I'm offended about something, everything can be rosy and great, and you've done a super job, and then bingo, you're out. I have said to some of these younger students, if OISE and the what's the U of T, Teachers College or whatever, I said, had videos of me, they'd probably say, don't do that because she's raising her voice. She's speaking very sharply to those children. She's not being nice. Well, as I said to a number, if I'm in a new class, I'll say, and they're not behaving, I'll say, my default position is to be friendly and pleasant. But I said, you know what? And actually, I heard JPB say the same thing. I'm pleasant until you aren't. Right. If you're not going to be pleasant to me, don't expect that I'm going to be pleasant to you. But I think at the OISE and places like that, they're taught all the woke stuff and, don't blame the kids. It's not their fault. And so the younger teachers, I think, in general, here's what it's called, authority. My twin sister, she still teaches as well. We're 74. We grew up in really good schools with fantastic teachers, and we walk in with authority. Like, kids know it. And JPB is the same. He's got authority. People know that. You walk into a classroom, I think even before you open your mouth, they're pretty clear that you're in charge. And then some of them, of course, really push back. If you're only in for a day, you're not going to turn it around. But if you get a chance to come back, you can. But they know what authority is. I think that's what the younger teachers in general are lacking, because they've not been at schools where there's a lot of authority. They have not been taught, because I'd fire all of the people at OISE, because I think it's an indoctrination center. I don't think it teaches teachers how to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic. I think it's...
How do you think teachers should be found then? Because, everybody goes to university. There's all kinds of people who know all of the disciplines. And why is it that the education system puts out the people that teach our kids? Could it be done a different way?
I think because of the culture we have now, like, how would you do it differently?
Well, actually, what did they used to do? We used to just take teachers who had a math degree.
Now, would that be high school? You see,
That would be, but you could also, there are people who go through university and want to teach little kids. So
Yes.
they want to teach little
Yeah.
kids. You'd have to have somebody who wants to.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how they choose them. I do know that a principal friend of mine, he said to me 15 years ago, he said, the boards are interviewing people to be principals, people we wouldn't even, or hiring people who we wouldn't even interview 10 years ago. And you see, there's, again, the diversity. The diversity is not in thought. The diversity is, if you fit the right group.
Right.
So I'm not too sure if they hire teachers based on that. Because I'm a supply teacher, I don't see things straight across, And
I imagine they're hired for these modern diversity ideas.
Exactly, and they'd have to go
Diversity
along.
of race and
Absolutely. You know what? Because now the interview will say to you, how do you
Identify?
How do you honor diversity? Well, you know what I'd say? Golden rule.
Right.
I'd say that's how I honor. Of course, I wouldn't be hired. I would have to start dicing the different groups. I treat this, It is so damaging what they're doing. So hiring on. Of the questions they ask them, it's just to say, are you on our side ideologically? If you're woke, you're in.
Yeah.
If you're not woke, you're not in. So, of course, I'd never be in now. I'd never be in because I did have an interview with the principal. 2000. And it was grade 7, 8 special ed class. I only went for the interview because I didn't really want to teach 7, 8. Then when the class had no windows because it had been an open area school, another horrible idea that the educational establishment fell for. So anyway,
What's that?
Oh, the open area schools, it would be, you have one huge floor, no walls, and 4 different classes.
Oh, I see.
So how you're teaching music in one class, it's all. So what they did
in a big gymnasium.
Oh, it was ridiculous. It was so ridiculous that they had to build walls, and of course, for the classes that were on the inner side, they had no windows because they had to put the walls up. So I saw the classroom and I knew I couldn't teach in it. But she said to me, "How do you motivate your students? How would you motivate your students?" And I said, by setting high expectations. I said I would do it by setting high expectations, making sure that I did the requisite work so that they could meet those expectations. I said, because self-esteem is not handed on a silver platter, I said it's earned. And she actually hired me on the spot. I didn't accept it. She said, so she was probably expecting I'd say, I give stickers out for good behavior and, or if you can fill a jar with jelly beans, you get a party. None of that. I never did any of that. You know what? Because it works really well when the classroom's working well, when you're teaching what the kids need, when they're seeing that they can be successful at the work you've given them. They know you're not dumbing down. That's another thing. Okay, in my classroom, that's another big thing. Dumb down, dumb down, dumb down. That's what the faculties do. That's what of education. That's what the ministry does. That's what the schools do. And the board, they dumb down, dumb down, down. It doesn't work. The kids don't like it. So one of my mottos was smarten up. Yeah, that's what my kids were expected to do, smarten up. And also use the text. They'd misspell things, and I'd say, well, that was right in your... and I never used readers. I used literature all the time. I often rewrote it for them at their own level. I'd say, if the word is in the text, you are required to spell it correctly. And if they didn't, they had to write it out 5 times. So within 2 weeks of getting into my class, they were using the text, because they didn't want to have to write the word 5 times. And then, back to faculty. I went to the Faculty of Ed, at the corner of Spadina and Bloor in, I guess, about 1970. And I wonder if he's still alive, very handsome guy called Arne Bowers. He was the principal of the faculty. Anyway, if I could see him, I would shake my finger at him. He used to talk about Miss Tudd. Miss Tudd was title, underline, date. And he made fun of her. Don't make kids do that. Make kids do that. That's called a boundary. You should see the kids' workbooks. A total mess. They don't know how to use a margin. They don't know what a margin is. They don't know how to number, and do it neatly. Mm-hmm. They don't put at the top page number.
And date.
Date. That's called miss. I hate to think of the generations of teachers who said, and you can tell by looking at their work, it's a mess. Not all of them, but I'm not kidding, most of them. If you open up one of their math workbooks or even their other workbooks, some of them just write, they don't use the margin, and they write sort of across the page so it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And they'll put that there and then another answer at the top over there. It's a total mess. Mm-hmm. I love Miss Tudd. Title, underline, date, which just means organizing, right? Mm-hmm. And so he put that down. So generations of teachers went out saying, it doesn't matter if they organize their work. Let them do it any way they want. And, right, like when I see some of these pages, I'm only a supply teacher, so there's not a lot I can do. But actually with one class, foolscap paper, and for your spelling test, you'd cut it in half. And so anyway, I gave them out, and I said I'd often mark their work. Loved their teacher, but their work was a complete mess. They wouldn't use the margin. It would be on the other side. So I actually drew a picture of the piece of foolscap they got. I said, what is this red line? It's a margin. I said, okay, you're going to number 1 to 20 in the margin. So I did 1, 2, 3, and then I said, you do to 20. And I said, and you were going to put a date at the top and your name with a capital letter. Some of them are in grade 6 and still don't put a capital letter in their name. Mm-hmm. And I said, and I'm going to, I said, if there's a real problem, you'll have to rewrite it. Anyway, they did a really good job that day because I'd said, this is what I want you to do. Let's organize it. Now, is there anything wrong with organization? Arn Bowers, there's nothing wrong with organization. And you told generations of teachers to forget it. Mm-hmm. And nasty Miss Tudd. Right. Well, I'm a Miss Tudd. I'm a stickler. I'm tutoring right now, and my student did not put capitals on Wednesday. And I said to him, I've given you a model. I said, I've got an uppercase W. Oh, and I've underlined. Now, Wednesday's hard for underlining syllables. So let's go to Tuesday. And he hadn't underlined. And I said, the model is right there. So obviously he hasn't had teachers who've said, use what you have. And that's called teaching to success. If I've given you a really good model, use it. Mm-hmm. Why reinvent the wheel? So there we are.
Yeah, well, teaching, there's many ways to teach. Some are good.
Yes.
Some are successful and some aren't. And the idea is to find the successful ways to teach.
Yes.
And the ways you find success is, how are your students doing?
Precisely.
Right?
Yep, that's it. And I was really fortunate at growing up in the schools I did. We were well taught. At Jarvis, we had, here's another of the things, and this happened like 50 years ago. At Jarvis, we had 10 English periods a week. 5 were literature, and 5 were composition, where we learned the structure of language. I actually called my program a structural language program. I worked on individual sounds, words, root words, endings, prefixes, parts of speech, just building up to mastery, because we did that every day. So the thing is, at least 50 years ago, the ministry said, oh, no, we don't need composition. Well, it's sort of like, how are you going to be, if you don't have a skeleton, your body's going to be a piece of jelly on the ground. And it's the same with English. I mean, if you don't know what the foundation, what are the component parts of how English is put together, then you're supposed to deal with literature. No, they said we don't need the composition. So the younger teachers don't know parts of speech. They don't know. They didn't précis. Do you remember précising?
No.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Précis are high-level thinking. So on your test, you would be given, let's say, a 250-word passage, and you had to have to rewrite it in 150 words.
I see.
Which takes a lot of thinking. Okay, what's the main idea? So you'd leave out the extraneous things. That's not easy.
A summary, yeah.
And not easy. It's it really takes a lot of brain power. And then parsing, and we had to get a long sentence. What's the bare subject? What's the bare predicate? They stopped teaching that. And so that's the foundation. It's sort of like the skeleton or the firm foundation made of rock. No, they said we don't need that. We'll just do literature. So of course that I think ended up with way too much how I feel about it. If you're dealing with literature, you've got to look at the structure of it. There are lots of things you have to look at. I mean, it's so long since I've written an essay, but it's not how I feel. Oh, and it's not a summary. I went to U of T in 1981. I just had my first daughter. I had to make up a course, and we were asked to, it was short stories. So we had to write a write-up of the short story. Apparently, most of the class wrote a summary. No, you have to look at it. What's the symbolism? What is the symbolism in this? How does it work? What is the author trying to say? I did it properly because I'd been taught properly how to do that. So you take away the foundations, and it's just how you feel about it, or just writing a summary.
Right.
And he also, I went up to him afterwards. He was a very nice professor, but he said, now if you can read the story, you can write. You can write an analysis of the story. So I went up to him afterwards. I said, look, I'm a special ed teacher, elementary school. I said, a lot of kids can perfectly understand a text, but don't know how to write about it. I said, because the hierarchy of language is, of course, listening, speaking, reading, writing. Writing's very high level. I mean, I can read some French, but to tell me to actually, would you write a summary in French? I'd say, well, no, I'm incapable. I can actually read the page, and I know what it's saying, but I don't have the ability to write in response. So I just said to them, if kids are dyslexic or have other problems, I said, yes, they can read the story. But honestly, I was just for his information. I just said, you said to them, if you can read it, you can write about it. I said, well, there's a big gap between reading something and then writing about it.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Yeah.
Well, no, you have to learn how.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what's been going on in the news lately.
Yes.
Because there's some TDSB controversy happening right now based on the principal, Mr.
Richard Bilkszto. Yes.
And
what a tragic story.
Yes, and he committed suicide just recently, but he was put through some DEI training in 2021.
Okay.
And at that time, he had to take sick leave.
Yes.
And now has taken his life. And this has been in the news, and it's been in the news all over the place.
Yes, it has.
And so I think that talking about this a little bit, because it's a very difficult thing to talk about.
Yes.
It's a difficult thing to understand, but it's even more difficult to understand if we don't talk about it.
I'd agree.
Right? So let's try to do our best.
Yeah, let's do that. Well, they're setting the kids up for this as well. Now, I have not been, I don't go to staff meetings, so I don't know what happens in staff meetings. But, I can go back 20 years. I was in a staff meeting, and the principal said, we have some new guidelines about LGBT. And I sat there. I was really, really nervous. And as you can tell, I'm not really a very nervous type, but I felt really, so I put my hand up. I thought, you know what, I am going to speak up. So I put my hand up and I said, I am an observant Christian. Well, you would have thought that the air had been sucked out of the room. Complete silence. And I said, I would like to say that when I hear you speaking about this, I said it tends to divide people up into different groups. And I said, some are included. And I said, I certainly have to say that I do not feel included. Total, utter silence. Now, the interesting thing is my best friend and staff was a gay man. and he lived with his partner. Anyway, so there was no discussion. Nothing happened to me. On went the meeting. But about 3 days later, one of the teachers came up to me in the hall and said, "Judy, I'm not a Christian like you are, but I and a lot of the teachers are really glad that you said that."
Right.
Because we agreed it's very difficult to treat everybody equally if certain groups are given certain passes that the others aren't.
Yeah.
So this poor Mr. Richard, I'll call him. I wish I'd known him, because I would have bucked him up. I would have said, "You know what? They're awful to a lot of us. It's not you. Don't I don't even know her name. The director of education for the Toronto District School Board makes $300,000 a year. I don't know what she does for that. We could do without her. If she weren't there, we'd still be teaching and doing what we're doing. And then her second in command is now the director of education in Hamilton. And the second in command actually said, "I'm really glad that this is happening to this man. It's good for him to feel uncomfortable. He should feel uncomfortable. That is ridiculous, as far as I'm concerned." So this diversity, inclusion, I'm not included. I keep my mouth shut at school. It'll be interesting to see who in the Toronto District School Board actually sees this podcast and what happens to me, whether I get any jobs again, whether people who actually like me now will turn against me.
I can't see why.
That could happen. It could. It could happen. So I don't know. But when I spoke to JPB at that dinner, the only thing, I gave him a lobster. I had a little lobster that I gave him. And I just said, "I've been teaching in the public system for 51 years. He immediately said, "Are you willing to go public?" And I said, "Yes," because I really am now. This is before the tragedy of Richard Bilkszto.
Yes.
And this just happened now. And did that surprise me? No, because there's no diversity of opinion. There's no inclusivity. And what's the other? Equity. There's no equity. Certain groups are in, other groups are out. And if you're an out group like me, basically I keep my mouth shut. I don't. If I were at staff meetings, I'd probably be doing a lot more talking. But all right, British Christian. My ancestors were here. 1799, the Baldwins. Canadians don't know their history. The Honourable Robert Baldwin with Louis Lafontaine. They got responsible government, which meant some voting. In 1848. There would have been no 1867 without the Baldwins. Nobody knows about them. They're my grandfathers, or great-grandfathers. I've got farmers, a lumber baron, a banker. He was actually George Hay. He was the first president of the Canadian Bankers Association. Just a kid from Rotherham in Yorkshire, no money. Ended up a multimillionaire living on the mountain in Montreal. Another one was Standard Life in Montreal. Anyway, so my British Christian white ancestors built the infrastructure of this country. People like them. School system completely ignores them, except that they're colonizers and bad.
Right.
That is unbelievably not diverse, not inclusive, and not equitable. I mean, the big lie, it's such a big lie. Now, I don't talk about those things at school. I'm teaching K to 6. There's not a lot of chance. Although I was in a class where they were doing the Indigenous thing, which is also anti-Catholic. There's a book called Fatty Legs about an Indigenous girl. It's a novel at a residential school. And you should see the pictures of the nuns. They look like Maleficence or whatever her name was in Sleeping. Unbelievable. I did show it to the principal. I said, this is hate. This is hate. A lot of the nuns were wonderful, and there were nuns who weren't, there's no doubt, but the pictures of this woman, she looks like something out of a horror movie. And I said, this is hate. It should not be allowed. And I don't know if he did anything. Well, I don't know if he did anything. But in this class, thinking I would probably be canceled, I said, well, they were talking all the Indigenous. And listen, bad things happen to the Indigenous people. Bad things happen to lots of people.
Yes.
Lots of people. Anyway, I did say to the kids, thinking I might be canceled the next day, I said, I would just like to point out, because I said, this is a fact. It's a fact that is never in the information that you're getting. I said, many of the chiefs asked for their children to go to residential schools. I said, the reason being is they lived in very remote, out-of-the-way places, and they couldn't have a school on all of their reserves. They also didn't have electricity, and, I said many of the chiefs, because they realized that their children were in a country where people spoke English and read, and of course you've got something like, what's his name, not LaFontaine, I can't remember to say, who's a lawyer. I mean, he's Indigenous, and speaks up the whole woke stuff, but you think, well, wait a minute, you became a lawyer because you went to a residential school. You learned to speak and read English. So I said to the kids, many of the chiefs actually asked that their children go to these schools so that they could learn about the major culture in the country. And I think I even dared to say, and many of the people, many of the nuns and religious people were kind and caring. And all you're hearing are the bad stories.
Yeah, and there definitely were bad stories. There were definitely bad actors, people who took on those positions, working with children, and had the wrong ideas of how you treat children.
Exactly, and I would totally agree with that. But let's see the whole story.
Yeah.
Let's not. Now, I actually couldn't read it because it's a Quillette, which is it's like a Substack, I think.
Yeah.
And it's behind a paywall, but written by my good friend Ian Gentles. He was a professor at York. He's retired, and it's apparently a 34-minute read, and it's about the Indigenous situation and the residential schools, and it's filling out the whole thing, not just what we're being told. And he goes to my church. I was talking to him, and he was quite concerned because there's a group of them who have been looking into this. He's a historian, and he said Trudeau has actually said that I'm not exact that they should be charged. If they don't follow the party line on talking about the Indigenous people, they should be charged.
Oh yeah.
He
would say that.
Yes, he would say that. So my friend, I was so glad when I saw it the other day. I thought, great, there's, Ian's.
I'll look that
and I tried to subscribe. And you know how sometimes you try to subscribe and the red comes up and it said try it. So I'm actually thinking he's away at his cottage. I think I'm going to just email him and say, can you send me a link for it? Because I tried to subscribe and couldn't. So I really want to read that. Now, if I took that into a school... I'd like to give it to my good friend who teaches grade 6, but it might be offensive to her. Oh, not to mention that if she actually used it in class, isn't that horrible?
Right.
That we're not allowed.
There's no free speech.
There's no free speech in the Toronto District School Board. You keep your mouth shut. Like certainly a person like me, I know I keep my mouth shut. And in most cases, because I'm a supply teacher, I come and go. I haven't been in very many situations where I'd have to go against what I actually believe. And if there have been a couple, and I just simply, I think I wrote, I lied. I didn't have time to cover this. Just left it at that. Didn't talk to the teacher about why. And that's another thing you have to be very careful. I've got many good friends, people I'm really fond of. Some of them, when they see what I've been talking about today, some of them might not be my friends anymore.
Right.
I hope that's not the case, but that's what Richard Bilkszto found. People he thought would support him did not.
No one said anything. Yeah,
they didn't support him.
Right, and that's something that we should talk about too. When my husband spoke up too, no one supported him.
I know that.
And we've got to realize that what people need is community. If we have communities that will stand with us, then we can have the courage to speak.
I can't wait to see ARC. Now, now, please tell me what that acronym means. ARC.
It's Alliance for Responsible Citizenship.
Beautiful. And that is a project of your husband's.
Yeah, it's a project.
I can't wait to see.
The 30th, 31st of October and November.
It's going to be in London, correct? I love it. I can't. So that will be sort of seed for communities. These people will come from around the world.
Yeah, come from around the world and then go back to their communities and see what they can do within their communities.
Yes.
So there isn't any policy.
Okay.
going to be made at these meetings.
Okay.
This is going to be discussion. It's going to be vision, a positive vision for
Yes.
the future.
Yes.
To take back to your community and see where you can.
So, yeah,
make
one
changes.
wonders, I mean, how can one take that back to the education system? How do you do it? There's no opening for it because they don't invite outside people.
Yeah.
And if you're an inside person and bring it up, you're gone.
Yeah.
So, but listen, I'm very excited about ARC. I think it's going to be wonderful,
Mm-hmm.
and I also like it's sort of like ARK as well. You know, Noah's Ark to
Yeah.
preserve. And here's another thing, to preserve our past. The woke people think everything was horrible in the past. Everything was not horrible.
Yeah, that's right. You know, I've done some work in understanding resentment, and that's another place where if someone is resentful towards someone else, they're looking at them in a specific situation, in a specific situation that made them feel like they were treated wrong. And so one of the things that I always found helpful is you think of that other person, you get a list of positive personality traits, you write down everything that you can think of that person has that's a positive personality trait, then you find that whatever it is that you're complaining about is only a small piece of what this person is, and it puts it in perspective, and it allows you to let something like that go and not make it so important. And
That sounds wonderful.
yeah, these are things that we've not realized, that our point of view, we have to realize that our point of view is only one instance. It's only one instance.
Yeah, and you see, the sad thing is that the kind of people who are running our boards, our ministries, our schools, especially now, are woke.
Well, are they parents?
Parents might be the way to get this kind of thing in.
Well, you know,
Maybe.
there are people, we've been traveling around the world,
Sorry.
you know, for the last 18 months
Yes.
on tour. And especially when we came to Canada, we started talking about civic duty and the duty of the people in the audience who are parents and who are students and who are either at the beginning of their careers or ending their careers. But if something bothers you, so if the school board bothers you, or if your city council bothers you, then that happens to be your problem. Because it bothers you, it's something that is speaking to you personally. It might not be what you want to talk about or what you want to think about, but now actually it's something that you have to pay attention to because it's called to you
a really good
to pay
point.
attention. And so getting on these, putting honest, realistic ideas into these school boards and on these city councils, that's what's necessary to bring these
Right, and
turn these
certainly
things around.
in the States, you know, the parents are really pushing back.
Yes,
and they're
they are
taking
starting to put
over
back.
exactly,
And in Britain too.
which is great. And yeah, it's actually sort of occurred to me, maybe I should run for the school board, but you know, at my age, with my gimpy hip, and I now have a grandson, you know, I think, but you never know. I mean,
Yeah.
As you say, if there were a community that was supportive, then maybe I'd say, you know what, I've got support. I'm willing to go out there.
Yeah.
and
We have to support one another. And staying
Yes.
silent, you know,
Yeah, and you know,
staying silent will not fix things. And
No.
it'll put you in the worst place possible because when you sit on the fence,
Yes.
you're going to find yourself
Yeah, and of course
falling
your
off.
wonderful husband. I mean, watching him recently, I watched a lot of his podcasts. You know, he says, "No, I'm trying to go out and tell the truth."
Yeah.
And I was a little concerned. Well, I was really glad to be coming to speak to you, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to go out and tell the truth. I'm ready to do that. I'm ready to do it in a public forum. We'll see what happens. And yes, we do need more of that. And believe me, there are a number of teachers, and it's very sad, who are with me all the way, who would agree with me, but they feel in a box. They feel
Yeah.
that it'll just make their lives miserable.
Well, if anyone comments on this podcast and wants to talk to me, I'd be happy to talk to any school teachers who want to
Wonderful.
talk. Because
That's
I think we
wonderful.
need to speak to one another.
Yes.
And it's up to us to make sure that other people can feel more confident in saying what they have to say.
Yes. And as you can tell, I'm an extrovert. I know my subject. I know more than like a lot of teachers and a lot of my friends even, I actually, don't know what's happening in the world, which I'm upset about it because I think there's so much happening out there. And if you don't know what it is, then
Well, it's your responsibility to find out.
that's what and you're talking about the civic. To be civic,
Yeah.
you've got to know what's happening.
It's a little tricky, though, because we don't know who to listen to now, right? Because the legacy media is having, in Canada, the legacy media is owned by the government.
Yes.
So you can't listen to that because you know that is a biased point of
Absolutely.
view. So who do you listen to? And so that's very tricky.
Well, I think that's part of being well-formed. Now, I'm now a Catholic. I was an Anglican. The Anglican Church has gone off the rails. I'm now a Catholic, and that was one of the happiest days of my life. And I have to say, it was on a Sunday I was at one of these upscale schools. I didn't tell anybody at school except for my best friend because I knew I would be labeled right away as a throwback. Like anybody who'd become a Catholic. Now that's another thing. Anti-Catholic. That book I talked about, Fatty Legs, the portrayal of the nuns, was hateful. It wasn't. It would have been fine, but the picture. And I believe in the story that there was a nice nun. I think which is good, but the pictures are hateful. So I didn't tell anybody at school, except my best friend, that I'd become a Catholic, even though I was ecstatic about it, because I thought I will right away be pigeonholed. She must be this way, and this way. Whoa, to become a Catholic now. What a ridiculous thing to do. What a horrible thing to do. So, anyway, back to the civic thing is to know. And I think if my Christian faith informs me, my gut informs me. From the minute I heard JPB, the second I heard him, I thought he's authentic. I loved him on CBC with the woman who thinks she's a man. The
professor?
Yeah, the professor. He just nailed it, and she sounded like an idiot. She really did, because she didn't have a good case. So right away I knew that Jordan Peterson was someone worth listening to. And he's never let me down. I listen, I know a lot about a lot of things. I listen to what he's saying. 12 Rules for Life, I bought that. I make my bed every day, even if I don't want to. And you see, that's again, Arnbauer's talking against Miss Tudd. Miss Tudd was an organizer. She said, be organized. Know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Know what your goals are. And then Arnbauer's kind of went, and of course that's exactly in 12 Rules for Life what Jordan Peterson was saying. And look at the lives he's saved.
Yeah,
that's
many,
amazing.
Many lives.
He must.
And there's lots of people. There's more and more people standing up now too, and that's
another
very
thing.
encouraging.
It's sort of like a magnet, isn't it? The more the more people who speak, the
Yeah.
more people who will come together
Yeah.
because they realize I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd known Richard, because I would have said, you're not alone, Richard. Come out and have a beer with me. Well, I'll have a glass of wine, but because he isn't alone. I mean, I'm sure
It does. It really does, though. When the mob comes after you, I think it feels like you're alone. And and also, I have never been mobbed, so I don't know what it feels like. My husband was mobbed.
Yes.
So I was close to.
Yes.
Close to it, and I did feel that it was possible that things were going to get violent. And so for a little while that was a worry. But I'm also not one to worry much. And I do have a lot of hope and a lot of faith.
Yes.
So that's very helpful. And I have a good community. I have a good family, a good community. And even though maybe the university didn't stand up with Jordan, although they did eventually turn around and support him. At the beginning they didn't. But all of our friends were very supportive.
That's fantastic. Yeah,
Right?
that's
and
really
so
good.
that makes a big difference. And you think when something
Sorry.
happens to someone that you don't exactly know what to say, but it isn't what you say. All it is that you reach out.
Yes.
It isn't what you say. It's not important that you have an answer. All you have to say is, I'm here.
Yes.
Really.
Yes, and to know that you haven't been shoved aside.
Yeah.
Which, because there's Richard who killed himself. I mean, it's devastating for many people. I'm very fortunate. I have a very supportive family, supportive community, including the schools that I go into. I mean,
Right.
basically, I'm the one that I mainly go to. I'm well loved at the school. I love the kids. I love the teachers. Most of it is a very positive experience. So again, though, doing this podcast could put a big hole in that. I'm not too sure what it's going to do, but I'm prepared at this point. I thought I really need to speak out because we need to turn things around.
Yes, we do.
We do need to turn things around. And the more people hear, I'm sure there'll be many teachers who are listening to me and saying, good for her. I'm really glad she's saying that.
Mm-hmm.
When I go back to the school, I won't be talking about this. I never go to the staff room anyway, but if someone wants to come up to me and say, I saw that, thanks a lot, great. Or if anybody wants to phone me or email me about it, that's fine. But, I won't go into the school thinking I'm going to be talking about this, but it'll have happened. People will know about it. Yeah, so Tammy,
It's about our children, right? It's about supporting our
absolutely.
children. And we're really getting to a low point.
Our children are they are very, and here's the mission statement. Oh yeah, nothing in the mission statement of the Toronto District School Board about reading, writing, critical thinking, and math. Their job is not, Cam H will look after
Right.
sort of the, I mean, it's just, anyway. Yeah, a coordinated approach to providing a continuum of service that is aligned and responsive to the needs of students, parents, and staff. Well, I'm saying their vision certainly is not aligned with teachers' needs.
No.
Students come first.
Or parents.
Sometimes the sad thing is the difficult students usually have very difficult parents, and they'll go after the teachers. And now with email, I mean, some of my good friends are doing email at 11 at night. From a parent, what I mean? There's no way to get away from them.
Mm-hmm. I see.
Oh, right. And they want, their kids to be able to do retests. Can my kid do the test again? Well, lately my friend said to one particular parent, no, your child cannot do a retest. And the parent said, well, is the purpose of the test to evaluate how much of the content they understood?
What else would it be about?
And so the teacher, she's a fine teacher. I mean, everything was totally clear. It was all written out. This is exactly what you're supposed to, know. And the student didn't. So a lot of parents now are, I call them adult toddlers. There are a lot of them around.
And when you have the report cards, what do you put in the report cards now? Is it pass, fail, or is it percentage?
No, I do think they can get A's, B's, and C's, because I haven't done it for so long. I should find out. Then they changed it, which I wrote all my report cards, my own comments.
Yes.
Now, and I know tons of parents, I don't know whether it's still the case. What they would do is it was a drop-down menu. It would simply say what they'd studied. It didn't say anything specifically about the... Or it would just be the exact same words, but it could be understood well or had a slight understand or whatever. But the language was just straight out of a drop-down menu. And the parents said, this is just too formulaic.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to... So
no relationship at all then.
No. And now, again, you see, I'm a good writer. Writing report cards, I didn't like writing report cards, but I'm a good writer. Our younger people are not so adept, because they haven't been taught very well. So they probably found that a lot of them, when they wrote their own comments, didn't do a very good job. But I did hear from a number of people that parents were really complaining when they went to simply the drop-down menu, because it simply stated in sort of jargon, in a way, what the kid had done. And then it just said, understood it very well, understood it partially, didn't... But, so you read the whole thing and there's nothing personal about your own child. Now, I think possibly there was a space at the end where it was like a summary.
Teacher's comments.
Where the teacher could actually comment.
One other thing I want to talk about.
Okay.
Gender clubs at school. Now I know, so my kids are 30 and 31, so it's been a while since I've had kids in the school system, and there weren't gender clubs when my kids went to school, but I have a friend whose daughter is now 14, and when she was 10 or 11, she was in a school in the TDSB, and they had a gender club at school without telling the parents that their kids were sent to this club. And in this club, they discussed their discomfort with their genders, and they even gave her a boy's name at school to use. And she eventually talked to her mother little by little, and her mother figured it out, and then prayed for her daughter, and showed her Abigail Schreier's videos
book
on gender to show her exactly what it really means. And one morning, the girl got up, had a shower, and looked in the mirror and realized that maybe she had been wrong, that maybe she did want to be a girl, and burst into tears, was ashamed that she had gone down this road of believing that she could, that it would be better if she was known as a boy, and admitted to her mother now a year later that even though sometimes when she feels uncomfortable, she knows that changing her gender isn't going to be helpful. But this was a secret. This gender club was a secret, and the parents knew nothing about it.
How did they choose the kids to be in the club?
I wonder if they were all in the club. I don't know, or if it was just the kids maybe who were, because she's pretty artistic. She's an artistic kid. She's introverted.
Yes.
So, right.
Well, a lot of them are like that. And I've never heard of a gender club in any of the schools I have been in. I would be horrified. I am horrified.
Yeah,
that is
horrified.
Horrible.
Yeah.
And what some people are talking about is that they're basically. Do you know Helen Joyce?
Yes.
Yeah, she's wonderful.
Yeah.
She and others basically. If you, many of these children are autistic or on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And so and puberty brings out a lot. A
lot of discomfort.
Well, my puberty was not that uncomfortable. I can't remember. I can't remember. That was in the 60s. I can't. But we didn't have social media. We didn't have all this.
Right.
See,
I have
we
no
were very
idea.
protected. We lived within boundaries. The adults knew the boundaries. The adults were adults.
Yeah.
They knew the boundaries. So I think we were much more protected. Not to mention we didn't dress horribly. We dressed modestly.
Yeah.
We didn't have all the slutty stuff on TV and so on. So our poor kids,
yeah.
Anyway, I don't know if it was Helen Joyce who said it, but it's basically you knock out puberty, and what it's doing for a lot, especially the boys, it's against gay. It's
a lot of these
gays.
kids are
they'll
gay.
become, if you leave them alone.
Yeah.
Like what was it? Ken Schultz? No, he was at CAMH. He was the sort of preeminent person who dealt with
Ken Zucker.
Ken Zucker.
Yeah.
And we said if you didn't do anything,
intervene,
they grew out of it.
Yeah.
And he said, and many of them, maybe most, were gay.
Yeah.
So this person says they're sort of knocking out gayness. If they're saying, become a woman, pretend you're a woman. Well, no, don't pretend you're a woman. If you're gay, you're gay. That's it. And accept that, and there it is. So what they're doing. I've never. How do they? On what grounds do they get to have? Was this a Toronto school?
Yeah, it was a Toronto school. Yeah.
Now I have not heard of that. Unbelievable. We can't even give them an aspirin at school.
Yeah, I think it was the librarian who'd set up the gender club.
Okay.
Right. So you just don't know what's going on in some of these schools. That these people are having ideas of introducing our children to these ideas of gender dysphoria. It's not acceptable.
It's not acceptable. Absolutely not acceptable. Did the parent, when she found out about it, did she, and I'm not
I don't know.
to be critical, did she
I don't know how much.
Go to the school?
I don't know.
She?
Well, they moved actually out of the TDSB.
Okay. Because of that?
They moved, yep.
Okay. And you see, parents are afraid to speak up. because they will be labeled.
Yeah.
You're homophobic, you're transphobic, you're this or that. Now, one thing that the Toronto schools have done, which quite annoys me, every school, I think they all have one, I could be wrong, but gender-neutral bathrooms. So at one of the schools I go to, the best staff bathroom was taken over. It says gender-neutral students only.
Right.
So that's our bathroom. It's one of our best bathrooms. It's central, and we lose a bathroom for who's gender-neutral.
Right.
So I've often thought that I might like to use it, and if I get caught, I'd say, oh, well, I'm self-identifying right now as a lifelong learner who's gender neutral.
Right.
I mean, it's quite ridiculous. I mean, you just self-diagnose. So it would seem that, I have to laugh. I'd sort of like to say that, I'm a student, and right now I'm self-identifying as gender neutral.
Yeah.
That's why I'm using the bathroom.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Just to be able to use the
and of course, it's a one-way street. Only one group gets to set the boundary, or not the boundaries, but the rules. And then I would imagine that there are many, many teachers who are against, especially the trans thing.
Well, we have to, if there are many, many people against this, then this shouldn't be happening.
Precisely.
In our schools.
And your husband is one of the people who is making a huge difference in people willing to speak up. Like here I am today.
Yep, here you are
I am.
today.
After 51 years. I mean, I could have spoken up many times before. I haven't. And I just thought I'm ready.
Well, these podcasts have made it possible for people to speak up, too.
Precisely.
It really was, you would have had to write to a newspaper, and the newspaper would have had to decide to publish your letter, so it's different than it was.
Yes, and I did write a letter about Richard and his situation and the way the board, and it was longer than a letter should be, but and I did actually hear from the letter's editor, which I was surprised. She just said, we had many, many responses, I think I did write back. I totally accepted it, but I then wrote and said, I do think I'm in a different category from many of the writers. I said I would be the only teacher who's been in the board for 51 years. So I think I would have liked it. I think it would have been fair to publish my letter just because I am in a special category.
Right.
Most other people are outside the system.
Well, we can put a link to your letter if you want.
Oh, okay. Well, that'd be good.
Yeah,
I'd
we
like
could do that, and then it'll be out there.
Very good. Okay, that would be very nice. And the more people who speak up, a lot of people who hear this podcast will say, yes, I agree with what they were talking about. I totally agree.
And even if you don't speak up, make your next right move to truth.
Yes. And, Jordan Peterson talks about truth all the time. That is so important. And I think, you were saying, how do you know who to trust on well, if you're a truth-telling person, you usually discern and people, look at the millions who have discerned in Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
This is a man who tells the truth. And I respect that. Not to mention that his telling the truth, and there is no such my truth and your truth. That is such a fiction. There is truth. And you might have your own truth, and okay, that's fine. But there's actually the truth. And so when people tell the truth, wonderful things happen.
Yes,
it opens up hearts and minds and gives courage to people.
Yeah,
it's so Jordan Peterson has been one of the greatest truth tellers, and he's wise. I'd like to ask you a question. Is he still reviled by lots of people the way he was?
All of that is online.
Okay.
In our day-to-day lives, people are very respectful.
Great.
They're very respectful, generous. Lovely people.
Lovely.
Everyone who stops us, really. It's
I can imagine.
It's all online, all of that, because people, when they're online, they don't feel like anybody is going to stop them.
No,
so
they hide
They say
behind,
whatever they want.
Precisely. They hide behind.
They would never say that in person. You know
Right.
what they say online.
Right. And they say some nasty things.
They say some terrible things.
I'll bet they do. And I'm very glad that I love that your grandparents and, you've got,
Yeah, that's fun, isn't it?
I'm a new grandparent.
Yes,
so
you
yeah.
are.
And
That's
he
fun.
just started to crawl today.
Oh, yeah?
And I will need to put a gate. I have my computer downstairs.
Yeah.
I'll have to put a gate around myself
Yeah.
because, right away he was over and I had to turn my fan off because he might put his little fingers in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a whole new adventure.
Yeah.
And I did say to my son-in-law, here's the nice thing. When he goes to school, I said if he's not being taught the kinds of things he needs to be taught, I said, here's Granny.
Yep.
I'll be there, and we'll be doing schoolwork and fun. I mean, I'll make sure we do fun things.
Yeah.
But making sure that he gets the basics to mastery.
Well, one of the things that I was talking to actually with this woman whose daughter is fine now.
Thank God.
We were talking about people wanting to homeschool, but that can't afford to homeschool.
Yes.
And we were saying that if we were thinking, well, we need to set up a website to teach people how to set up a school week. And then if you can get together with other families,
Yes.
then one family per day can teach.
Yes.
And we can have, if you can't send your kids to school, and this is a problem these days.
It definitely is.
And I think there are ways to educate them at home, but we have to think this through. But you don't have to do it by yourself. Again,
Yeah.
it's about community.
I know lots of people who have done that. And actually, I'll even put myself forward. If you do get something like that, I'd love to be a consultant. Because, I could say, well, here's how, you need to teach this
Yeah.
in math. You need to teach cursive writing. Actually, I've got a dear friend. I tutored some of her kids. She has 15 children.
Oh, wow.
15.
Wow.
The baby was born, the last baby, when she was 45.
Wow.
Well, you don't have to have beautiful-looking children, but if you're going to have 15, they are gorgeous. They look like... Anyway, they're a happy family. They don't have tons of money. I went one summer, a couple of summers, actually. I went out one day a week, and one summer I taught 4 of her kids to cursive write.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I went out every Saturday, took them some donuts, and we did cursive writing. And I loved it. I really loved it. And so if you should know of a group that can use someone like me, because, I would be a good resource, because I could say, you tell me what you want to teach them, and I
Yeah.
can show you best practice. Now,
Yeah,
not saying that
right, it would be
they
good.
themselves couldn't, but I will say for myself, I was very, very resourceful. And also it's my temperament. If one of my kids did not know how to do something, I found a way.
Right.
And I didn't use workbooks. I made my own templates. I came up with my own ways of doing things because I'm very forceful, and it was never done in an unpleasant way. I just say, you know what, he can't do that. I'm going to find a way to
Right.
make sure that he can do it.
Right,
I'm going to
right.
find a way that works. So I've got lots of things that work. I've got lots of tricks up my sleeve.
Oh, yeah. Well, this should all be...
Yeah, so if it happened, I'll be one of your resources happily.
Okay, well, I'm going to talk to my friend this weekend, and
Yeah, and
we'll see where
if that-
she's at.
I'd
with
love to
that
talk to her
project.
at some point if it works out.
All
yeah,
right.
Because as you can tell, I'm passionate about teaching.
Yes.
I love teaching.
Yes.
That's why I still do it, and I'm good at it. I do a good job, and the kids know that. The kids, they recognize if you're pushing them to something good.
Yeah.
That you're not being mean or anything.
Yeah.
That you're doing it for their best. For their best, that they'll do the best they can. And that's what our kids need. And they've been failed over and over. And Toronto District School Board fails them over at the official level. Reading this mission statement, it's ludicrous. It's like word salad. Kamala Harris could have written that. I'm not kidding. It's disgusting. I wish I could go in and say, here's what you should be saying. We want... reading, writing, math are not even mentioned in it. It's a Toronto District School Board. It's not a therapy board,
Right.
although they think they are. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
We want therapy, and the therapy is just be nice to kids. You don't push them too hard. Oh, if they don't want to do it, and they're falling for all the woke stuff. I mean, I'm very unhappy with the LGBT, especially the T stuff in the school. That's not their job.
No.
That is not their job, and they shouldn't be doing it. I mean, a school that I go to, I really like it, flies the gay flag.
No.
And then they fly some indigenous flags inside, and I'm thinking, wait a minute. I mean, it should be.
It shouldn't be political.
It should be exactly. It should be the Canadian flag.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
And once they do that, well, certainly I would say the LGBT now it's got about the whole alphabet's there now. When I see that flag, I say, you know what, I am not included in that. I am dead. Now, I treat everybody individually with respect. A trans person I would treat with respect. It's not that I'm not respectful or kind to individuals, but that, as you say, is a political statement.
Yeah.
And once they fly it means that someone like me, a traditionalist Catholic, is not included. Definitely not included. And that shouldn't be the case. I don't want Catholic things in the school. I'm not saying, please, could we have Catholic things in the school or prayers? Okay, I'm not asking for that. So why am I supposed to be subject to another, well, mine I don't believe is an ideology, but an ideology that I disagree with? Leave that for outside of school. You want to do it, fine. You know, it is a free country, but the schools are taking it on, and it's very bad for kids because it confuses them.
It confuses them, yeah, that's right.
It confuses them. I mean, little
no
kids
room
being
for
told,
politics in
maybe
the
you're
school.
not a girl. Maybe there was a case in Ottawa, they've taken it to court, and I don't know what's happened, but the little girl, 6 years old, came home like crying and wanted to see a doctor, you know, because she said, Mommy, the teacher says that I might not be a girl.
Oh, dear.
That is, that's child abuse.
Yeah.
In fact, I find the whole sexual template that's dumped into the schools now is child abuse.
Yeah, I
because
agree.
it's ideological. It interferes. They want, the Toronto Board wants mental health. That's the best way to break the kids down so that their mental health is not good. So the board does exactly the opposite of what it says. Totally hypocritical. Absolutely hypocritical. So, yeah, and there are lots of wonderful people on the Toronto Board. I'm not saying, individuals, there are many wonderful, wonderful people, but the people who lead us, I mean, the head of...
Well, these ideologies, that's the weird thing about them. You can speak to a person, and they seem fine, but you get them with a whole group, and then the ideology is complete when all the people are together, because it's a system of ideas, right? And so each person is only a part of that idea, and so it doesn't seem so bad with individuals, but you get them all together, and they becomes quite powerful.
Yeah, and I haven't been at a staff meeting, for ages. Oh, that's one of the wonderful things about being a retired teacher.
Yeah.
No paperwork, no prep.
Yeah.
Although I'll tell you, when I go into classes, I do a lot of prep, because if I roll up my special ed sleeves. If we're doing math, I come up with, I'm going to teach them a lesson, and I often make a template to go with it, because I love it. I mean, I always want them to be successful. So I say, what can I do that's going to make them really understand this concept and then be able to do the seat work? Anyway, I can't remember quite what I was saying, but... the only time I spoke up at the staff meeting was when we were getting new LGBT, and that was 20 years ago. The word T was not really around, but it was called LGBT. And as I say, my best friend on staff was a gay man, but I had to speak up because I thought we should not be singling out particular groups for special treatment. And I was really, my mouth was dry. I put my hand up. But I wonder if teachers do. Probably most teachers just keep their mouth shut.
Yes.
In staff meetings, because if they do speak out, they could have everybody turn on them.
Yeah.
And throw darts at them figuratively.
Right.
And then they've outed themselves.
And they have to come there every day, and they find that impossible.
Yeah, and so schools, we get along really well, but the sad thing is that virtually any topic of real importance is not discussed because of, it's such a difficult, I'm having a word retrieval problem. The whole thing is set up, it's like a tinderbox.
Yeah.
The whole...
But, our conversation has been fairly easy. We've talked about some contentious problems.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to talk with people, at my school about these things. But you know what? Even the person who think really well might be violently against what you're saying.
Yeah.
Now, one would hope if they're your close friends that they would say, well, I know Judy's a good person, so even if I completely disagree with her on that, I'll still be her friend.
Yes.
But that doesn't always happen.
No, well, that's what I was saying about this resentment.
Yes.
People will take this one instance,
Yes.
and then they generalize to the whole person, but that
You see, in the woke
that's not
culture,
true.
the woke culture incubates that idea. And especially in the kids are taught to be offended.
Right.
They're told about their rights. They're taught to be offended. When I went to school, we did not talk about rights. We talked about responsibilities. That's what we talked about. And we treated each other well. It was the golden rule. We liked our teachers. They liked us. We learned a lot. Now the kids, I mean, in a classroom, in a classroom, you have to be very careful what you say at times.
Yeah, well,
because
that's no good.
it's ridiculous. And, get over it. I once, this is the second time I was suspended in the school I liked. There was a guy, I can't remember what it was called. You know, when a woman would be doing the news on the street, and then these guys would come up behind and say bad words and the F word and stuff. So one guy did that, and he was fired from his $100,000 a year job. And I was supposed to talk about integrity in that classroom that day. And I had my newspaper, and right on the front page was the story that he lost his job. We had the best conversation I think I've ever, we figured he might have been drunk.
Right.
Was it okay that he did it because he was drunk? No. And I didn't get in trouble for this. What I said, this is just my opinion, but I said being fired from his job for doing that, I said, I think is excessive. He'd been put on standby for 3 months or something, but fired. So we talked about that. And then I said to these kids, I taught them since kindergarten, and there were a group of about 6 boys in the class who were always pushing the boundaries. And I said, it's interesting. I said, this man was 30 years old and obviously had not decided what the boundaries were. He was outside the boundaries of decent behavior. And I said, some of you in this class, I said, I don't even know if I said some of you, but I might have. I said, yeah, I did. I said, some of you in this class, I said, you're only 11. And I said, you're having some boundary issues. So I said, hopefully, and I would call this health and safety. I said, hopefully, for your sake, by the time you're 30, you will have figured out what the boundaries are so that you don't get into this kind of trouble.
Yeah.
Well, 2 of the boys went and spoke to the principal and said they were offended by what I'd said. And I was suspended.
Oh, is that right?
I've never been back to that school since.
Wow.
Yeah.
And a lot of, you talk about being Catholic, and, whether you're Christian, so we're Christian, and our book is the Bible, and our laws are from the Bible, and everyone used to go to church.
Yes.
When I was a little girl, everyone went to church on Sunday. All the stores were closed on Sunday.
That's right. Yeah.
Everyone went to church Sunday morning, and then everybody came out of the church, and the kids went to the playground, or maybe there'd be a picnic, and so then you knew the people that were there.
Yes.
And that gave kids the understanding and the know-how to go to school on Monday morning and know how to act.
Yes.
And that's all gone now.
No, it's gone. Yeah. I mean, our communities have been shattered.
Yeah.
And I know that JPB talks about it as well, JBP, the nuclear family. I mean, the biological family. So a lot of people would say, oh, that's really, you're not being inclusive. Well,
yeah, it's old-fashioned.
It's old-fashioned. Well, I don't need to be inclusive. I mean, the nuclear family is a fact. Everybody has, some people don't like this, a mother and a father, biologically.
That's one of the streams at the ARC conference.
Wonderful.
Is family.
Yeah, and as I've said, I come from a divorced family. When my twin and I were 7, our parents separated. We were very fortunate because our grandparents lived in Toronto, and they had a lovely home, and we went and lived with them. So it was a nice extended family. And then I married a man who was divorced. So I know all about divorce. And so what I'd say is, it's not a really good thing.
Everybody in everybody's families has divorce. And everybody has different kinds of arrangements. But that doesn't mean that there isn't an ideal arrangement.
Precisely. And it doesn't mean that I support the nuclear family. I think our governments, like Hungary, is really, Orban in Hungary, is giving, if you have 4 children, you don't pay any taxes.
The mother.
The mother doesn't pay any taxes.
The mother that doesn't pay any taxes. For the rest of her life.
Yes, exactly.
And if a grandmother is taking care of her grandchildren, she gets a tax break too.
I love it. So you see, he's saying the nuclear family is really important. And the people who don't...
He's saying it's ideal.
Yeah, well, it is ideal. And the whole point is people say, you shouldn't say that because you're leaving people out. You're not being inclusive.
No, you don't have to leave out.
No, exactly.
Those people there's space for those people.
Yes.
There's space for all kinds of people. But that doesn't mean that you sacrifice what's ideal.
Exactly. And the ideal does work best for kids.
Yeah.
It does. And I mean, well, even at my church one day when I was an Anglican, we were talking about the nuclear family. And I went to the table. It says, is the nuclear family the foundation of the extended family? And I'd gone and said, yes. One of the people sort of attacked me and said, well, that's really exclusive, the nuclear family. And I mean, what if there were divorces? And yeah, so not even accepting the ideal just because it doesn't always work out that way. Mm-hmm. But it's better. Like when I was younger, more people wanted the ideal. Mm-hmm. They wanted the ideal, and they worked hard at it. So the easy divorce thing. I mean, my husband and I were married for 40. He died 2 years ago. We were married nearly 47. No, we were married 47 years. We nearly made it to 48. We were married in December. We had a lot of difficulties in our marriage, as most people do. Yeah. I mean, it's not, you don't just get married and it's all lovely.
Well, that's why you get married, so that you have a contract together, so that you'll stay together when things get rough.
But that's sort of gone, the idea. And I'll tell you that our Christian faith and our adhering to our vows saved us. Because we just said this is not an option for us, which is also a lovely boundary. Yes. Like it's very helpful when so you don't spend a whole lot of time worrying how you're going to get divorced, because you say, well, or separated, because that's off the table. Yeah. So you're channeling your energies into keeping it going. Yeah. And
finding a better way.
And once our children were older, I mean, life. I worked full time. There was lots going on in our lives, lots of good things too. Mm-hmm. But once there were lots of responsibilities, and well, actually, I think I told you, and I don't mind saying this. My husband, I stupidly realized way into our marriage, was Asperger's. He had Asperger's syndrome, which is why he was very passive and why he didn't do certain things I wanted him to do. Or, he was a lovely guy. He was quiet, introverted. So when the children were younger and there were so many responsibilities, I felt resentful a lot, because he just sort of was always just sort of himself, being quiet, being introverted. Once all of that was over and the kids were grown up, we just settled into a very happy, comfortable relationship with each other, and no resentment. The resentment was gone, and I'm just so glad. But look at all the people who give up, and it usually makes their lives worse.
Well, it definitely makes the children's lives worse.
It definitely makes the children's lives worse.
That's right. It's about the children.
That's one thing. If we separated, we didn't have two big salaries, we would have had to sell the house. That would have been horrible for the children. Right. Although my dear husband, you know what he said when we were talking about that one time? He'd said, Judy, you keep the house. You keep it. I'm not going to go for my part. So that's sort of, he was a very kind, good person. I wished he'd been more dynamic, but there we are. I mean, it could have been far worse. Right. And I was a child of divorce, so I knew. And look at all these families with 3 stepmothers, 2 stepfathers. Where do you go at Christmas?
Yeah, the kids get pulled here and there.
Your ordinary families, difficult enough to deal with. Yeah. But then when you've got, and who goes here and who goes there, and what Christmas do you spend with this person?
We wish the best for all these different arrangements.
We do.
But that's not to say that a mother and a father centered on children, a nuclear family, isn't ideal. Because
who loves the children the most? In most cases, it's their own parents. Like children are, that's why, I had a stepfather. He could be quite unpleasant to us, although we loved him. We did love him, but he wasn't our father. And we saw much less of our father than we did of our stepfather, but our loyalty to our father was fierce, and especially the older we got. And he actually, I'm sure he had PTSD. He'd gone over to World War II when he lied about his age. I can't imagine what he saw.
My grandfather lied about his age too. And then his mother went and told him the truth. So he didn't get to go to the lab.
Oh, yeah. Well, my dad did go. And I think, my parents were separated when we were 7, and he did have some mental problems. And I'm pretty sure it was PTSD. Oh, yeah. He'd seen stuff that was too much. Yeah. He never remarried. And the older we got, the closer we got to him. And parents love their own children. They're flesh of their flesh, bone of their bone. And children are tough, as you know. They take your money, your time, your effort. They take all of that. And people who are not related to them don't have
a harder time with that.
Exactly.
With that relationship.
And children living with non-related adults are much more likely to be abused. Like, these are the things we need to talk about.
Yeah.
You know,
it's the truth.
It is the truth. And so we've got to talk more truth about the good things.
Let's talk truth.
Yeah. So
thanks very much, Judy.
Tammy, a pleasure. Just a pleasure.
Good. Very good.